This is the culminating moment of our 8th annual Public Policy Institute Spring Symposium. And our symposium has been so successful because of folks like you and so many folks who ensure that we are able to create spaces for very respectful, deliberative discussions about important public policy questions in our community, in our county, and in the state of California. We have so many VIPs here this evening. I do want to do a shout out because so many of our elected officials are wonderful, all of them are wonderful partners with us, ensuring that we have access to them, they provide their time to us. We have Councilmember Kevin McEwen is in the house tonight. Kevin, thank you so much for being here. Councilmember Anahara is here. I'll just say we have the mayor here, and Professor Davis is going to say a nice introduction in just a moment. The city manager, Mr. Rick Cole, is here. And if I might say, Rick is a rock star. He did an incredible presentation and talk with our panel last night as we screened City Rising at the Aero Theater, which is also a very important partner of ours. We have the Vice Chair of the State Board of Equalization with us tonight, Tony Vasquez. Tony, thank you for coming. From the school board tonight, we have Maria Leon Vasquez. We have Vice President John Keene is here. School board member Lori Lieberman is here.
And from the school board, the president of the Santa Monica Malibu School Board, Dr. Richard Tildren.
Thank you. From our Board of Trustees, Barry Snell is with us. Yes, woo. And then I have to say, well, I was going to say Nancy as the founder, Sonia, I don't have my glasses on, but I could hear Sonia's voice. I have to tell you that Nancy Greenstein, the founder of the Public Policy Institute, Dr. Nancy Greenstein, who currently is the vice chair of the Santa Monica College Board of Trustees, and a great partner to our program, and a friend to both myself and Sherry, Don Gerard, who's our senior director of governmental relations at Santa Monica College. And everybody here's a VIP. If I forgot you, please forgive me. We want to just say how incredible our program is. And like, really, that's what you want to say, Richard? Yes, I want to say how incredible our program is. We are in our 8th year, and we have graduated over 300 students with an AA degree in public policy at Santa Monica College. We have been blessed to have a founder in Sheila Kuehl, who we know is now on the Board of Supervisors. We have this incredible degree pathway, and we have a certificate of achievement, which is so important to the development of a really respectful civic environment and community engaged in questions of importance for those of us living and breathing in the same moment together. We have 5 policy tracks, and those 5 policy tracks are in environmental public policy, health policy, arts and cultural affairs, education, and urban socioeconomic. And of course, tonight's theme and the theme all week is in that particular track. I just want to say that it's been an incredible gift to be a part of this program and to work with Sherry and everybody else. And I love to say everywhere I go that it's never a day of work to be at Santa Monica College.
And as we mentioned, our Public Policy Institute team, our colleague Carrie Ann Farrell-Hines is here as well, who was a wonderful moderator for our event last night when we screened City Rising and had a great panel with City Manager Cole and community leader Irma Carranza and school board member from Inglewood, Dr. D'Artagnan Scorza. So I want to also thank our partners that make this work possible. We are so lucky to work closely with the students at Santa Monica College through student government, which is known as the Associated Students. We thank them for their support in so many different ways. We also thank the SMC Associates, one of the support groups at SMC that is helping us with some of the resources we need to put on the different events and provide refreshments and such. We also have a partner in the Santa Monica College Foundation, and the foundation supports us in a lot of ways as well, and in fact has set up some different scholarship programs that are made possible by very generous donors to the Santa Monica College Foundation for the Public Policy Institute. And we also thank our colleagues here at the Broad Stage and all of the work that the crew does to make this evening possible. And we also are covering this. City TV is here, and we have student videographers here, so we are recording this evening's proceedings so that we can perhaps post it on our website if we get it edited down so that we can do that. So as you know, the theme this week has been There Goes the Neighborhood Part 2. It's Part 2 because Part 1 was in the fall. And we started exploring the issues around gentrification and displacement in the fall, and we continue with how might policy approaches prevent displacement in neighborhoods affected by gentrification. And we've been exploring that all week. I wish I could tell you we had all the solutions worked out already, but we know this is a very complex issue, so we'll be hearing more about potential approaches tonight. We want to thank the many community leaders who've collaborated with us this week. We've mentioned a few of them who've been panelists, who've been helping us, understand the history of this Pico neighborhood here in Santa Monica. So we just want to make sure that they all know how much we appreciate them being involved. And again, we just know that this is an issue that is very complex. It has a wide range of opinions, and we appreciate the respectful and thoughtful discourse that we expect to have this evening. So.
Thank you. Sherry, I think you're going to take it away here, right?
I think so.
All right. Thank you again for coming.
Until you and Carrie Ann are facilitators for our Q&A part.
Oh, yeah, we're going to have the mics for Q&A.
So let me just do a little bit of framing for how the evening's going to work, and then we'll introduce our speakers, and then they'll talk a lot more than I'm going to talk. Tonight's actual theme is called Where Goes the Road to Solving California's Housing Crisis? And what we hope to happen, what we expect to happen, is that our three speakers will each have about 20 minutes to do an overview of their perspectives and their expertise. And there is a possibility that Senator Allen may be a little late because his flight is delayed, but our other two speakers are here, and I'm about to introduce them. Then after they're finished, I will prompt them with a couple of questions just to maybe have about 15 minutes of discussion. And after that, we'd like to open it up to questions and answers from the audience. And if you would like to ask a question, we will have microphones on the west and the east aisles, and Richard and Carrie Ann will have microphones so that we can facilitate asking questions. We would like to be able to prioritize questions from students because the Public Policy Institute really wants to help students understand how to be civically engaged, and we really appreciate questions from students. So students, be thinking about what you might want to ask our panelists. And we ask that those who do ask questions in a very brief way, and our facilitators will be guiding that as well. And again, this is an academic forum, and we ask that we all maintain a respectful and civil atmosphere, because we know this is all about fostering civic engagement and expanding knowledge and learning from each other. So with that, allow me to start by introducing Mayor Gleam Davis. Come on out, Gleam. Gleam, of course, is the mayor of Santa Monica. She first joined the city council in February of 2009, and then was elected in 2012 and 2016. And at the time she joined the city council, she was on the planning commission here in Santa Monica, and she was the co-chair of Santa Monicans for Renters' Rights, or SMR, very effective advocacy group for rent control and protecting renters here in Santa Monica, and advocacy statewide as well. And she also was quite involved in education and early childhood issues and senior issues. She served on the Santa Monica Early Childhood Task Force and served as chair, and she was involved with Community for Excellent Public Schools, or CEPS. And she continues as a council member to be a strong advocate for those issues. She emphasizes the character, livability, sustainability, and safety of Santa Monica's neighborhoods, and she maintains her strong commitment to lifelong learning and educational opportunity. In her day job, Mayor Davis, who I will probably call Gleam most of the evening, is a corporate counsel for AT&T, where she supervises all of its litigation in the Los Angeles area. She's also chair of the AT&T Legal Department's West Region Pro Bono Committee, and she actively works with the nonprofit called Kids in Need of Defense, or KIND. So thank you, Gleam, for being here, and give her a round of applause while I... Ben? No Ben. Okay, Ben's not here yet. Flight's not in yet. So I'm going to introduce him when he gets here, I think, before he speaks. So I have the pleasure of introducing Senator Scott Weiner. Senator Weiner represents San Francisco and northern San Mateo County in the California State Senate. He was elected in 2016, and he focuses extensively on housing, transportation, civil rights, criminal justice reform, clean energy, and alleviating poverty. He chairs the Senate Housing Committee. Before being elected to the Senate, Senator Weiner served as a member of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors, representing the district previously represented by Harvey Milk, and he chaired the San Francisco County Transportation Authority. So he really does have a perspective from the local government level as well as being a state senator. Before being elected to office, Senator Weiner practiced law for 15 years. He spent nearly a decade as a deputy city attorney in the San Francisco City Attorney's Office. He's also served in a number of community leadership positions, including co-chair of the San Francisco LGBT Community Center and on the National Board of Directors of the Human Rights Campaign. He has lived in San Francisco's Castro neighborhood since 1997, and he studied at Duke and Harvard Law School. So, Senator Weiner, will you please come on out, and we'll hear from him for a few minutes. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you and good evening. It's great to be in Santa Monica. I look forward to my colleague and friend, Senator Ben Allen, arriving. Senator Allen and I are actually seatmates in the Senate, and when Santa Monica and San Francisco get together, the good kind of trouble ensues. So it's great to work with them, and you are very lucky, and thank you for sending both Senator Allen and Assemblyman Richard Bloom to the legislature. They are both fantastic representatives for this community and great colleagues. So thank you for providing them to me as colleagues to work with. So when it comes to housing, and I know there are a lot of different opinions on housing, as we can see in the room and outside tonight, and there should be a lot of different opinions and disagreements on housing, because housing is foundational to almost everything else other than like air and water. When we think about what it takes to succeed in life, health and education and relationships and so forth, it makes it very challenging when people don't have housing. Housing matters a lot, whatever one's opinion on SB 50 or any other housing-related issue. And when we talk about housing, sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in very technical terms like zoning and CEQA and RENA and project labor agreements and housing elements and all the technical terms that we use around housing. And technical terms matter. But I think it's so important when we talk about housing to always remember that this debate is about real people and the effect on real people's lives when we have a housing crisis. People don't always understand the technical terms. They may or may not know what these terms mean. But people do know that they have a child who's away at school who's not going to be able to move back to the city they grew up in because there's nowhere for them to live that they can afford other than their parents' basement. They know that their child has a classmate who wakes up every day in a car because 1 in 20 school children in California is homeless. And that's an undercount. They know that they have neighbors, a young family, who just had a second kid, and so they moved away to Denver, or maybe they moved 2 hours away and they're going to have to spend 4 hours on a round-trip commute every day because there is nowhere in their community that they can possibly afford. And then there's the bigger picture We have the human carnage that this housing crisis, that this housing shortage has caused, but we have the bigger picture, the economic damage that it does when we don't have enough housing. There was a very popular restaurant in San Francisco that recently closed down, not for lack of business, but because they could not maintain a stable workforce, because their workers could not afford to live anywhere near San Francisco. We know that this crisis undermines our climate goals as we force people into longer and longer commutes because of the failure of places like San Francisco or many parts of Southern California, the Bay Area, that have made it impossible to build enough housing, forcing people into sprawl and long commutes. We know that this crisis pushes people into homelessness, pushes people into poverty, exacerbates segregation, hollows out our middle class. And it basically screws over our younger generation as young people cannot get a foothold. And people, when you ask them, if you went to someone and said, who should fix the problem? Should my city council member fix it? Should my state legislator fix it? Who should fix it? Most people, I would speculate, would say, I really don't care who's fixing it. It just has to be fixed. And so we get caught up in fights about should this be handled at the local level or the state level or the federal level. For most people, they correctly say, just fix it. And I don't care if it's the person I voted for where it says city council or state senator or anyone else, just fix the problem. And we have these fights about local control over housing and land use. And I'm a former local elected official, and before that I was president of my neighborhood association. Now I'm in state government. I've seen this from various levels. And local control, in my view, it's a little bit beside the point. The point is about solving housing, not whether it's being solved locally or at the state level. We all have a role to play. And local control is not biblical. It's often a good thing. It's usually a good thing, but not always. Local control is good when it delivers good results. And I would posit that California, our approach to housing of almost pure local control with almost no state role has not worked out. And the proof is in the pudding, if you look at the situation that we're in. So when we talk about housing, of course, we have to talk about displacement and evictions and what causes them. And there are various reasons why people get displaced from their community. But one of those reasons is because we have a shortage of housing. Housing becomes hyper expensive because we have a shortage. And yes, we need stronger tenant protections. Hello, Senator, welcome.
Hey, Scott. How you doing?
Hey, everybody. I told them everything then. And yes, we need stronger tenant protections. Yes, we need to invest a lot more in all forms of affordable housing, including public housing, and Senator Allen and I are working on that this year. But we have to understand that the root cause of this problem is our severe housing shortage that has built up over the last probably 50 years. So you look at the situation that we're in now, because some people say, you know what, it's not a shortage, we have plenty of housing. Well, there have been a number of studies that have demonstrated that we have a severe shortage, probably about 3.5 million homes, that we're 3.5 million homes short in California. And that housing deficit is equal to the housing deficits of the other 49 states combined. 1/2 of the American housing shortage is in one state, California. And the main critique I've heard of that 3.5 million number are from people who say, you know what, it's not 3.5 million, it's really 2.5 million. So either way, it's big. When you look at homes per capita and you rank all 50 states, how many housing units do we have? How many people, and what's the ratio between the two? California ranks 49 out of 50. The only state that is lower is Utah, with larger household sizes. When you look at where we've been over the last 60 years, In the early 1960s, California, a state of 15 million people, was building somewhere between 250,000 and 330,000 units per year. Fast forward to today, we're a state of 40 million people. We've almost tripled in size. And what's our housing production? For last year, 77,000. We almost tripled in size, and our production has gone down by over 2/3. And we're going down. 77 was lower than it was the year before and the year before that. We have a very high poverty rate in California, and a significant factor is that housing shortage is pushing people into poverty. So how did we get here? 3.5 million homes, 49 out of 50th in terms of homes per capita, having half of the unsheltered homeless people in the United States of America in one state, California. How did we get here? We got here because we created a housing system, frankly, that's designed to fail. We created a de facto policy in California that it's not a priority to have enough housing for everyone. That everything else, whether it's views, whether it's parking, whatever the case may be, matters more than whether we have enough homes for the people who need it. Now, let's talk about that system. And there's a thing that people say sometimes, don't hate the player, hate the game. And a lot of times, people demonize local government. People demonize city council members, planning commissioners, mayors, county supervisors, and say it's all their fault because they're not approving enough housing. I don't agree with that. We've set up a system where we have made it impossible for local government to do what it needs to do. And we ask city council members just to go out every week and vote for projects that people are yelling at them about. And no wonder we have a shortage. So it's about fixing that system. When you look at that system, which was created in the 60s and 70s into the 80s when we were a much smaller state, what did we allow to happen? Massive downzoning. In 1985, the city of Los Angeles downzoned and deleted 1/2 of its zoned housing capacity. One fell swoop, 50%. In San Francisco in the 70s and into the early 80s, we massively downzoned to the point where 70% of San Francisco is zoned for single family or 2-unit. Little San Francisco, this major job center, it is illegal in 70% of San Francisco to build even a 3 or 4-unit apartment building. We created all sorts of rules to say that even if you are building housing within zoning, it might take you 5 or 10 years to get that project approved. And we're going to make it really easy for anyone who wants to oppose it, even if they don't represent a majority view, to delay it and delay it and delay it and sue and appeal and make it take a long time. There are cities that have other strategies, like moratorium on housing, and we've allowed that to happen, creating caps on the number of units that can legally be built. There are some cities that even have population caps, which I was shocked when I first learned that, but cities that actually have laws in the books with a population cap for their city. We also, of course, have a tax system that is designed to undermine housing, and Prop 13, love it or hate it, is anti-housing because it creates a huge fiscal incentive for cities to favor commercial development over residential development. So what do we need to do to address this? And there's no silver bullet, and I know, and I'm flattered that SB 50 gets so much attention, both love and hate. And it's, we can do a study as to why one bill gets that much attention. I know it's an impactful bill, I get that. But there's no silver bullet. And no one bill is going to solve this problem. No one bill is going to change anyone's neighborhood overnight. No one bill is going to have that kind of positive or negative impact. There is no silver bullet. We're going to need to do a lot of different things to get out from under this crushing problem that we have that is undermining our economy, our environment, our diversity, our health, and our quality of life. What I do know, and I hope we can agree on, is the status quo is not working, and we need change. we need to be faster about approving housing. It should never take years or even a decade to get housing, whether it is low-income senior housing or mixed-income housing or student housing. It should never take that amount of time to approve housing that's within zoning. It has to be faster. We need more funding for affordable housing. We used to invest significantly at all levels in housing for our lowest income residents. The market is not going to produce housing affordable to low-income people in the near future, and we must have that investment. We're starting to do more at the state level in California. There are cities that are doing more and more. We need a better partner in the federal government, but we have to up our game in terms of that low-income affordable housing. We need to protect renters. Santa Monica and San Francisco were early adopters of rent control, but we know that in the vast majority of California, renters have no protections. And even with the fight last year about Prop 10, even if Costa-Hawkins were wiped away, the reality is that the vast majority of cities in California have not adopted any form of rent control. So we have to do better by protecting the large majority of tenants, of renters in the state of California who can be evicted for no cause, who can have their rents doubled or tripled overnight. And we have to have just better guardrails and accountability so that when cities are going about the process of trying to add more housing, that it's more consistent, that we have a shared goal as a state, that we want a certain amount of housing at different income levels, and that that can actually be delivered at the local level. And we need zoning reform. Zoning is not the only issue, but it is foundational. Because zoning fundamentally is about what is legal to build. And so when we talk about single-family home zoning, and I grew up in a single-family home, and single-family homes are important and will always have a big role to play in California. But when people say SB 50 wants to get rid of single-family homes, that's completely untrue. What we have now is a system where in 80% of California, it is illegal, prohibited, to build any type of housing except for a single-family home. 1 unit of housing per parcel. And what that means is that if you can't afford a single-family home in a particular area, then you can't live there. And so what we're trying to do is to say, let's allow different kinds of housing. Single-family homes, great. Apartment buildings, great. Affordable housing, which has to be multi-unit, great. And to be clear, when we ban apartment buildings by saying the only thing you're allowed to build is a single-family home, that's a ban on affordable housing. People aren't building affordable single-family homes. You have to have multi-unit. So when we look at zoning, it's about legalizing apartment buildings, legalizing affordable housing, allowing more housing overall, and making it a more diverse array of housing options. And it also matters where that zoning is. One of the things that SB 50 aims to get at is that we have areas, whether it's big swaths of LA, San Francisco, Silicon Valley, where we have these major job centers, huge amounts of jobs, and then we restrict housing through zoning so severely that it's impossible to build enough housing so that people can actually live near where they work. And so if you are in a job center, if you are near high-quality public transportation, that's exactly where we want the homes to be. Because when you talk about those 3.5 million homes, and when Governor Newsom says we need to build 3.5 million homes, and Antonio Villaraigosa said the same thing, 3.5 million homes, where are we going to build them? Are we going to do what we've always done and just say, well, you can't build it here because you can't even build an apartment building here? You just build it further and further and further out and build sprawl. And when you do that, you gobble up, cover up all the farmland, you push people into multi-hour commutes, increasing carbon emissions, you clog up the freeways even worse than they already are, and it's just not sustainable. And people spending 3 or 4 hours a day driving, that's not sustainable for an individual or for a society. So the state has overrode local zoning in the past. SB 50 is not the only time or the first time that the state has done this. The state of California for 37 years now, I believe, has mandated that cities allow in-law units or accessory dwelling units, which is an override of local zoning. California also has the state affordable housing density bonus, which overrides local zoning and says if you have a certain level of affordability, you can build denser and taller. And zoning reform it's not just a California issue. We saw that Minneapolis eliminated single-family home zoning earlier this year as a way of trying to reduce segregation. There's a proposal in Oregon to eliminate single-family home zoning and to allow more density. This is not just California. This is a national conversation about what we mean when we say we want housing to be more affordable and accessible to people. And what we mean, I think, is that we need more housing and we need it to be in the right place. So when you look at the coalition, not just around SB 50, but around a lot of approaches today to housing, it's really, it's inspiring to me, the diversity of the coalition. I think there's a stereotype that some will say that the only people who are supporting some of these pro-housing bills are the YIMBYs. And the YIMBYs have a very, very important role to play. And it was, before the YIMBYs were organized, there wasn't that kind of ardent pro-housing voice, at least in my experience in San Francisco. But it's not just the YIMBYs. We have a strong partnership with labor, and the California Labor Federation is strongly supporting SB 50 and other pro-housing bills, along with the building trades. It's one of the few times that I've seen the California Labor Federation and the California Chamber of Commerce come together and actually agree on something. That doesn't happen very often. We have nonprofit affordable housing developers who are supporting SB 50 and other bills. One of the sponsors of SB 50 is the Nonprofit Housing Association of Northern California, which is an umbrella for hundreds of organizations that build housing for low-income residents. We have support from groups like Habitat for Humanity and AARP and the UC Students Association and United Way. I say these things not to brag because there are plenty of bills that have good support lists. It's important to have a good support list. I say this because I think sometimes people will say, well, if you're doing this, you must be shilling for developers. That's like your developer shill. You must be shilling for developers.
Let's keep member civility, please. Thank you.
That's fine. The First Amendment's important. And then I guess the question is the California Labor Federation and United Way and Habitat for Humanity and the nonprofit affordable housing builders, are they shilling for developers? I don't think so. They just want people to be housed, and that's what this is all about in the end.
Member civility, please.
You know, I'm someone who constructive criticism is a good thing. We've been working on this for a couple of years now, and last year we had our first go at it, and we got a lot of constructive feedback, and we have intensively worked with those constructive opponents. There are some people who are just in the under no circumstance category. That's fine. But for the constructive critics, including plenty of housing advocates in Southern California, we've worked intensively over the last year to add the strongest tenant protections in existence under state law into SB 50, to add a robust affordability requirement, and to have delayed implementation in communities that are lower income and experiencing displacement. So we'll continue to do that work. There's a lot of great work happening in the legislature this year, not just SB 50. We have great bills to try to bring back some form of redevelopment so that we can fund affordable housing. Very important tenant protection bills that must be part of any package of housing that we pass. Thank you. And other bills as well. And then Senator Allen and I are working on a constitutional amendment that I'm sure he'll talk about. So, I'll just close by saying housing is hard. There aren't a lot of incentives for a politician to do aggressive housing work. You get called names and picketed and all that kind of stuff. But this is important. And whatever people think, whatever disagreements we have, this is about the future. It is about our kids and our grandkids. Some people say to me, you know, I agree, adding more housing supply will bring down prices, but it might take 10 or 20 years, so why should we do it? And my answer is, well, then let's start today, because this is about the future of our state. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Scott, before you leave, I'm guessing that there might be a couple of people who don't know what YIMBY is.
Oh.
Would you maybe give us a little primer on?
Acronyms, sorry about that lingo. YIMBY stands for Yes in My Backyard. It is a movement of not just young people. There are some wonderful 80-year-old YIMBYs I know, but largely young people who are saying, what is my future in terms of housing, and why aren't we building more housing, and why is everyone just slowing down and stopping housing? So it's a movement that started about 7 years ago, and it's grown. It's a national movement, and it's a very, very important voice in the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Allen is here, so as I'm going to do his introduction, and then I think he's going to make his way to the podium to make some remarks. We like to call him Ben because, of course, he's from Santa Monica, went through our Santa Monica public schools, graduated from Santa Monica High School, and first got elected to office as a school board member here in Santa Monica Malibu Unified School District. He was elected to the State Senate in 2014 to represent the 26th Senate District. And in his years as a state senator, he's been the champion of a number of important issues. He has served as the chair of the Senate Environmental Quality Committee, which he's chair of now, as well as the legislature's Joint Committee on the Arts. He's a member of the Senate Committees on Natural Resources and Water, the Judiciary, and Government Organizations. He chairs the Legislative Jewish Caucus and co-chairs the Environmental Caucus. He served as chair of the Education Committee from 2017 to 2019 and as chair of the Senate Elections and Constitutional Amendments Committee from 2015 to 2016. In addition to being a champion for education and for civic engagement and for issues affecting climate change, he is also one of the champions of the vaccination law here in California, the law that was introduced in 2014 after the measles outbreak at Disneyland, and that's been getting a lot of attention lately. So with that, I'm going to ask Senator Ben Allen to share his thoughts with us. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you so much, Sherry. Thank you. Well, it's a real pleasure to be here back on this broad stage. I will say I've never had one of these headsets before. That's when you really know you've made it. But it's fantastic to see so many good friends and folks here. And I do want to thank Scott for coming. This is far, far away from his district. And I really do think it speaks highly of you that you'd come here and speak your views and your perspective. And I do appreciate that a great deal, coming to my district and sharing your perspective with everyone here. And there's a lot about what Scott was talking about, I think, is on the minds of everyone in the legislature right now. We've got a very serious series of issues relating to housing affordability. There's no question that we've got unsustainable, unaffordable home prices and rent that's too high. If you look again right now, California's fair market rent indicates the amount of money that a given property would command to be leased for a two-bedroom apartment is now $1,386 statewide, of course, far higher here. To afford this level of rent and utilities, a household has to earn an hourly housing wage of $26.65 per hour. Once again, much higher here. A person earning minimum wage, that as a result, would have to work 3 jobs just to pay the rent for a two-bedroom unit. And here in Santa Monica on the west side, it would be so much higher. And so I think part of what Scott has really been focusing on is this kind of basic question of affordability and the challenges that exist for low-income people in general and people in general to be able to afford to live and work here. And I think you mentioned that California now ranks 49th in the country in shares of housing units per capita, with a population that continues to outpace meager growth in our collective housing stock. And it's part of why you have the governor moving as aggressively as he has been. He talked about during his campaign, he made a pledge to increase housing production statewide to build 3.5 million new residential units in 6 years, which is pretty extraordinary. I mean, that would require annual production every year to be roughly quadruple what it's been in the recent past. And in his first budget proposal unveiled in January, he actually threatened to take state transportation aid away from cities and counties that failed to build adequate new housing as allocated by the state. And he sued the city of Huntington Beach for failing to zone enough land to make the development of adequate new housing even possible. And he's obviously, I don't know if folks heard the news today, but there was a lot of new funding for homelessness, bigger state grants for affordable housing, new incentives to help regions meet their housing goals. So there's certainly a lot of movement and a lot of discussion happening in Sacramento right now that goes way beyond SB 50. One of the areas of discussion has been in the area of tenants protections, and Scott alluded to that a little bit. Obviously, there was the big statewide battle over Proposition 10 last year, but Richard Bloom, our state assembly member, had 2 bills that failed, but they sought to strengthen protections for renters facing eviction. There also was one that sought to repeal Costa-Hawkins, and there were several other attempts. And now I think they're coming back. They've tried to see if they can't come up with a way to tweak Costa-Hawkins as opposed to repeal Costa-Hawkins in the wake of the defeat of Proposition 10. So there's a whole series of issues going on with regards to rent control and renters' rights. You've also got a whole question about the extent to which we're going to be putting more money into new affordable housing. We had a big No Place Like Home initiative as well. We had a big bond measure that passed on the ballot. And so there is some new money coming down the pike. And obviously at the county level and the city level as well, with the passage of HH and HHH, there's now some significant new money coming down the pike for wraparound services and housing first as a response to the homelessness crisis that we have clogging our streets, and it's such a human tragedy that exists in our region. So, I will say that first of all, Scott and I have been working together on a lot of things. We were hand-in-hand partners on one of the core issues that I think is at the heart of what he's trying to do with SB 50, and that has to do with transit. And the fact that, one of the things I continue to say is that it's really tough here in California to talk about, here in Los Angeles, to talk about transit-oriented development if we don't really have a proper transit system at all. I am so excited. I grew up here in Santa Monica, right? My dad is English, a lot of you know, and we would go to the UK a lot when I was a kid. We'd visit my grandparents, and I loved going to London, and they literally let me, especially once I got to be about 12 or so, we'd get to Victoria Station, and they say, well, let's all meet at King's Cross this evening at 6, and you can go do whatever you like. And I'd go off to museums, and I'd ride the tube. And I always just was so struck, why don't we have something like this here in Los Angeles? Why don't we have a decent transportation system for people to get around? I liked riding the bus. I rode the bus to Samo High as a kid. But certainly the idea that that the Wilshire bus would be a viable commute option for people with tough schedules to go from, Beverly Hills to downtown LA every day on the 720. That's just not a lived reality for those of us who know the traffic situation here in LA. Now, some people do commute on that bus. A lot of low-income folks who have no other option. And there's no question we've got to get a better transit system in place for them and for our broader society. It's one of the reasons why, as part of the SB 1, Scott and I and a couple other people said there's no way we're going to vote for this thing unless there's serious money in place for public transit. And we were able to get, this was all the infrastructure spending on roads and bridges and the like, but as a result of our work, we were able to get $700 million annually down the pike to support the construction of transit in our cities and up and down the state. And I was very excited about that, and I was glad that the voters upheld that decision when when they rejected an attempt to repeal it. I think that's going to make a big difference. That plus Measure R, Measure M here in Los Angeles, in terms of just giving people more options to get around. I don't think it's actually going to alleviate traffic, but it's just going to give people more options. It's going to mean that instead of knowing that you simply can't leave your house at 5 p.m. without dying in traffic, you can at the very least have some option to get downtown or elsewhere. But there's no question that we're so far from having serious mobility options beyond the Expo line from Santa Monica. And the Expo line is fantastic if you live near the Expo line, you want to go downtown, you want to go to Culver City, or you want to go to USC. But if you want to go to Westwood, if you want to go to the Valley, if you want to go to the airport, if you want to go to Beverly Hills, if you want to go to Westchester, there's just still not a really decent option, short of sitting in traffic with everybody else on the bus, which is something I've done many times, but a really tough thing to sell people on as a real option. Now, that's one of the reasons why we have to expand our system. There's no question about it. One of the other things that Scott and I have been working on, he alluded to, that's SCA 1. And this was a measure that was passed by the voters in 1950. It was a piece of the Constitution, Constitutional Article 34. It was a very direct response to President Truman's Fair Deal, the Federal Housing Act of 1949, which he sought to help lower-income post-war families move out of the slums and into better living situations. But some Californians who were fearful of how this policy might change their neighborhoods drove the push for a ballot measure requiring local governments seeking to develop, construct, or acquire low-rent housing to also obtain approval for the development of the housing by a vote of the electorate. Not just a vote of their city council, but a vote of the electorate as a whole. And this was put right into the state constitution. And it's my sense that the state's changed a lot since 1950. First of all, we have very different attitudes about race and ethnicity, class, and poverty. But there are also far fewer tools providing residents with an opportunity to alter or block plans for new housing. There was no CEQA. There was no Brown Act. There was no Coastal Act. There were far fewer lawsuits in general. And I think both of us strongly believe that Article 4 stands as an additional anachronistic and ultimately expensive constitutional barrier that subjects local governments to a web of regulations and costly elections that end up driving up the price of building publicly financed affordable housing that is approved and supported by the local elected officials that are accountable to the local population. And so that's one of the reasons why we're joint authoring SCA 1, which will ask the voters to eliminate this article from our Constitution, which currently undermines the ability of our elected leadership locally to address California's acute housing and homelessness challenges. And I think it's an important thing. Thank you. Another thing that Scott and I have been working on, SB 35, a bill that he had a couple of years ago that basically said, and this kind of gets into one of my main concerns with SB 50 and the path that I think I'd like to see us take. But we did feel as though, and I continue to believe that we do have needs, and I did believe that there are some jurisdictions who really have been refusing to act because they just don't feel any obligation to build any new housing, and I think there should be some sort of consequences for that. It's one of the reasons why I co-authored among the first housing bills that Senator Weiner authored, SB 35, which was signed into law in 2017. It's now being used to streamline the approval process for new housing construction in jurisdictions that aren't meeting their regional housing production goals. And when folks elect to use SB 35 process, there's a streamlining that takes place, but it has to meet a series of very strict rules. And in addition, it only kicks in if the communities aren't meeting their housing goals that have been set out for them. Now, Scott's not the only person working in this area. Our pro tem, as I mentioned, Senator Atkins, had passed SB 2 a couple of years ago. That established a permanent funding source for affordable housing to generate hundreds of millions of dollars annually for construction of housing and homeownership assistance through a $75 fee on real estate transaction documents. There was SB 3, which was Senator Bell's bill, a bill that was just passed as Prop 1 on the ballot with a 56% approval on the ballot. It's a general obligation bond that puts money into programs to address the severe shortage in affordable housing stock. Assemblymember Bloom, Richard Bloom, our former mayor here, passed AB 1505, which gave city and county a clear right to establish inclusionary housing requirements as a condition of permitting the development of market rate residential units. I passed a bill that creates a new financing mechanism, an easier financing mechanism for cities to build affordable housing through a tank financing system. So there are certainly a lot of interesting things happening. There's new laws forcing cities to rezone their land, laws penalizing cities that deny housing projects in bad faith, laws providing state officials with authority to investigate and refer cities to the state attorney general who, when they fail to implement their housing plans. So some pretty serious stuff happening. But undoubtedly, the most controversial proposals that have been those focused on streamlining the housing approval process by limiting local government's ability to block certain projects that meet a set of state-defined criteria. And our friend Scott has been at the heart of that debate. First of all, last year, the bill that he mentioned, SB 827, which would have made it vastly easier for developers to build housing near subway, light rail, bus stops, in part by overriding city or county rules on height, density, and parking requirements. I certainly believe strongly in transit-oriented development, which the bill embraced. And I believe in strong transit programs, as I discussed. But I really do think that we've got to strike a careful balance between statewide laws and the power that the state provides for local government to manage much of their civic life and the day-to-day affairs of residents. And I really felt, in the end of the day, that 827, when it came to committee, I just felt that the restrictions, on local zoning control were just too extreme. And I spoke and I voted against it. So now we have SB 50, which in some respects is very much the product of a lot of discussion. It's true in the wake of the defeat of 827 in the Housing and Transportation Committee. But SB 50 also goes further than 827 in many respects. It does kind of upzone many neighborhoods and communities based largely upon proximity to transit stops. But there also is an enormously important portion of the bill that I think opens a real Pandora's box for our area in the sense that it connects to jobs-rich and good schools and the like. So there's certainly some things, with relation to displacement and the destruction of existing housing stock that have been taken into account with SB 50 that was not in place in SB 827. But some of the same really critical issues at play with regards to local control, I think, continue to be a problem, and in some respects have been exacerbated in the context of SB 50. And so, I think both of us agree that there is a tension between what government allows the market to build in its communities to meet demand and what it requires from the market on behalf of the public in return. I don't know that SB 50 really. I'm not really there in terms of where it balances that tension. Now, finding the right price to charge the developer isn't easy, and that's what inclusionary zoning and density bonus law is premised upon. In a sense, government is in the business of selling land use rights. I do worry that in the high-demand, hot residential marketplaces throughout my district, SB 50 would increase density without nearly enough guarantees that it will increase affordability for my constituents. And I think, I do appreciate the applause, but we got time constraints, and I want to make sure to get to all the points I'm making. But thank you for the applause. I'm a politician. I do appreciate applause. But I guess one of the concerns that I ultimately have is, and it's something I said in the context of 827. Developers are going to develop where they can make the most money, right? And there's a lot of windfall that they're going to gain from a bill like this. And this ultimately doesn't give cities the right to get anything in return, right? And I'm not just talking about shakedowns. There developers will complain all the time that the city asks me for all these things that have nothing to do with the development. And I, as a former local elected official myself, some of that money support came to our schools. I appreciate that. But a lot of this money is actually used to offset the impact of the new development, right? All these new people living in a place cost money, right? And I saw Rick Cole applaud when the comment was made about Prop 13. There's no question that Prop 13 does create a disincentive for cities to to approve residential versus commercial, but because ultimately the city can make a lot more money off of commercial than residential, and residential actually costs a lot of money for the city. What does it cost? It costs money to have a good school system, sewers, police, all that infrastructure that it takes to make a community run. That doesn't happen for free. And of course, I'm sure Scott would love to fix the broader Prop 13 challenges that were alluded to, but SB 50 doesn't do that, right? SB 50 doesn't provide any additional funding for cities that will be faced with an increased density. And so the cities are going to be kind of stuck cold in the bag in terms of how to meet the infrastructural needs of their new communities with a lot more people. And this, of course, was one, I don't know if you want to real look into this. Go look at what happened in Nevada when they spent $2 billion of subsidy to help get Tesla to open up a battery plant up there. And there's literally no money. I mean, not only they're really giving away money to Tesla to do this, and the local governments are broken because they're the ones who are stuck having to put in place sidewalks and electricity and broadband and sewer systems and water systems and everything else. And all that costs a lot of money. We have a lot of city council members here who know exactly how much that costs, and it does make an impact. I will say, in addition, I also worry about how future transit routes could become more controversial. The last thing we need is for people to fight against building rail and getting a bus stop near them because they'll be worried about it upzoning the neighborhood. I'm sure we can carve in some grandfathering, but I will say I did talk to Zev Yaroslavsky, who's been very concerned about SB 50, as many of you know. And we took a little drive around the district, and he pointed out a particular train station on the Expo line, and he said, if I had to convince these neighbors to accept this line here because it made sense in terms of connecting with the bus routes, and if these people knew that by accepting this, it would lead to, in some cases 75 feet, but at the very least 55-foot buildings in the area, there was no way they ever would have let this move through. So I worry about that. I worry about historic districts. I really do. I know that historic districts are. I know there's concern. There's a lot of comments sometimes made. Zoning, historic districts have been used as a tool. They were oftentimes written for zoning, for example. One thing I hear sometimes some folks say is that zoning in general was originally a racist tool, and there's some truth to that. There's some truth to that. Now, like the U.S. Army was largely formed to kill a lot of Native Americans. Now a terrible legacy. That doesn't mean I'm going to get rid of the U.S. Army today. I think it plays an important role to play. But there's no question we have to grapple with that legacy. We have to grapple with the legacy of zoning, the discriminatory impact that it has had. It's part of the reason why I'm passionate about working with Scott on SCA 1, because I really do think that was put in place for bad reasons, and it continues to. I just don't think it has a place in our current conversation. I'd like to see it taken out of the Constitution. But zoning does have something more. There's more to it than just that discriminatory history. And certainly the question of historical districts, I know that Scott may say, well, it's too easy to create a historic district potentially, but I don't know. I remember how mad everyone was when they tried to create one up in north of Montana. I remember all those lawn signs. It was really intense. But there is something special about maintaining the look and feel of the history of our state and neighborhoods, and I know that there's a struggle here in terms of a balance in terms of modernization, but I do feel as though we don't have enough history in our state. I want to make sure that a lot of it is preserved. I also so these are some of the issues that I'm concerned about. These are some of the issues that I'm concerned about. I also will say that one of the things that I'm very pleased in a bill that I proposed, SB 526, which seeks to create more teeth, more strength behind our sustainable communities plan so that we really can help to promote more walkability, more bikeability, more infill, smarter cities. SB 526 was passed out of the Housing Committee, and I appreciate Senator Weiner's support on that. I will say that all of these, so that's one potential path. One thing I also should mention, by the way, is that the city of Santa Monica really has done a lot. I do feel obligated to point out that despite the state's current housing laws and the planning and zoning authority given to local governments, this city, and all the issues that have been raised, there's no question there are a lot of tough disincentives associated with building housing at the local government level. But this particular city, has built and it continues to build enough new housing to meet its regional housing production targets for both moderate, low-income, and very low-income residents. West Hollywood's also met its regional housing targets on all categories too. Now, this isn't to say that no new housing should be considered and no new housing should be built, but it does suggest that when there is political will, there's a way to grow already dense cities, even while protecting affordable housing and the rights of renters. But I guess the question for me comes down to, how do we create? I think everything that Senator Weiner said was correct, right? We do have an affordability challenge. There's no question there's a generational aspect to this, right? I mean, I can't afford a backyard in my own hometown. I thank God I was able to get a little place in 2009 on a short sale that is already ridiculously grown in value. Hard to imagine how the price that Zillow claims my place is worth, given the quality of the pipes. But but I will say, so I think that Scott has done something. I think he's done the state a service in the sense that he has really helped to raise this issue and force this conversation that really wasn't happening before. And the question then becomes, how do we, SB 50 is one path. It's not a path that I feel comfortable with. But the kind of other question that I have is, okay, if we're not going to take SB 50, and who knows what's going to happen with the bill, but if we're not going to take SB 50, what other sort of system should we create? To claim that the current status quo is enough, I think would be a mistake. And maybe the answer has to do with creating some sort of disincentive system that would tell communities, hey, you got to meet certain goals. If you don't, there's going to be some consequences. But you can figure out how to meet those goals. So you can, if you want to create more density in downtown, you can do that. If you want to do it around certain types of amenities or transit or elsewhere, you can do that. And there will be consequences and also disincentives and incentives associated with meeting or not meeting goals. That's one thing I kind of want to get us to think a little bit about. But I really, in the end of the day, the idea that we're going to just take away so much of the basic fundamental power of understanding the local dynamics associated with development and kind of give it to a by-right system in run out of Sacramento just doesn't feel right to me. So that's kind of my take here. But as I say all that, if we're gonna I ask you, all the folks who've applauded and don't like this bill, if you don't like this path, we got to figure out another one that meets some of these enormously challenging issues. And I will say, as much as I disagree with aspects of what Scott's been doing, I really do give him a lot of respect for pushing this issue and, for showing the courage and the fortitude to show up all over the state and sometimes in front of audiences far less respectful than this one and raise his concerns about the impact of our housing crisis on the future of the state of California. And so I appreciate your attention, I appreciate your engagement, and let's have a great conversation.
Thank you. And we'll go to the local perspective. Mayor Davis.
So I want to spend some time telling you what a city with the political will to build housing can do. We're here to talk about housing challenges, and certainly you've heard a lot of interesting perspectives on how we should think about housing, both at the state level and locally. But one of the things that the government shutdown, the federal government shutdown that happened earlier this year showed us is that housing isn't just an issue for people who are our most economically disadvantaged neighbors. People with good, solid, middle-class jobs working for the federal government with good benefits, nevertheless, it turns out, are 1 or 2 paychecks away from housing catastrophe. And so we really need to figure out, whether it's at the local level or the state level, how are we going to make sure that everyone, and I underscore everyone, has safe, affordable, and decent housing. Homelessness is perhaps the most obvious symptom of our housing crisis, but it's not the only symptom. It's the people that you don't see who are living in their cars. It's the scary high number of students at UCLA and at Santa Monica College who are homeless. It's the people you don't know are homeless, the people you work next to every day who are homeless but are too ashamed to admit it. And so we really do have to think about, what is this housing crisis doing to our economy? We now know that people are moving out of California because housing is too damn expensive. And what is that ultimately going to do to the 5th largest economy in the world? I want to thank Senator Weiner. In 2017, as Ben mentioned, he passed SB 35, which created mandatory streamlining for residential developments. The good news is that in Santa Monica, because we already were committed to building so much housing, we didn't need to invoke those provisions. We are working on this issue locally. We have 92,000 residents in 8.3 square miles. But in 1990, this community passed a charter amendment, Measure R, which said that 30% of all new housing should be affordable to low and moderate income households. And from 1994, when the city first implemented legislation to ensure that affordable housing would be addressed as part of the creation of market rate housing, through 2018, over 5,000 new residences have been created in Santa Monica. And of those, 38%, or nearly 2,000 residences, have been deed restricted for occupancy for low and moderate income households. And we've been able to accomplish this through 2 primary methods. First, we actually have been investing as a community in the production and preservation of affordable housing. And second, we have used our local control regulatory mechanisms to support the creation of housing with an emphasis on affordable housing. So with respect to our own investment in affordable housing, we've benefited from a robust local redevelopment agency that contributed far more than the required 20% of funds towards the production and preservation of affordable housing. And as I think as many people in the room know, we were thrown for a loop when we lost those redevelopment funds, which at its peak was contributing $15 million a year to our efforts to build affordable housing. But we didn't let that stop us. What we said is, what are we going to do now that redevelopment is gone? And by the way, I'm glad to hear we might get some redevelopment back. First of all, we support our local nonprofits like Community Core of Santa Monica, who build 100% affordable housing projects. And they serve a wide range of people, including low-income families, and they also don't just build new housing, but rehabilitate existing housing, which preserves the fabric of our community. When we lost redevelopment money, we did have a few rough years about how were we going to fill that gap, but the voters of this community stood tall, and we went to them with GS and GSH, and they decided to tax themselves to develop money to be available to build and maintain affordable housing. So I think that this community deserves a round of applause for voting to tax itself for affordable housing. But we also use that inclusionary housing methodology. In the 1990s and 2000s, we created incentives in our downtown area for multifamily housing that included specific amounts of affordable housing. And people who've been here long enough remember what downtown used to look like. Now it's a community. We have lots of people living downtown. We recently updated our downtown community plan to require even higher levels of inclusionary affordable housing. And to encourage housing production, we have aggressive affordability requirements, but we streamlined the zoning process and we got rid of parking minimums, which allows developers to develop more inclusionary housing and get projects online faster, which we all know is a problem. So since the early 1990s, when we codified the requirement that market rate housing had to have an inclusionary affordable requirement, we have over 1,000 deed-restricted affordable residents that were created by private developers without city financial assistance. And the value of that market rate housing in Santa Monica has allowed us to develop aggressive inclusionary requirements while still allowing the development of market rate housing, which we now know is an equally dire need. So while Santa Monica's tools have been nonprofit affordable housing and inclusionary zoning, I want to talk about a recent project that actually was the best of both worlds. In this case, a market rate developer was proposing a significant residential development in our downtown. But that developer partnered with a local nonprofit to secure housing tax credits to build on a nearby parcel that the developer purchased. The project's been able to significantly increase the amount of housing, affordable housing, that would have otherwise been created under our inclusionary requirements. And for those of you who don't know it, please visit the Arroyo project on Lincoln. It is a beautiful project, an example of what local commitment to building affordable housing can do. Now, we know that creating housing is very hard in Santa Monica and throughout California because of land prices. And there are significant other challenges to building it. Building costs have been escalating rapidly. Our community members are rightly concerned about the character of their neighborhoods, and they want to make sure that new housing does not detract from their quality of life. But even with a local sales tax for affordable housing, we still feel the loss of redevelopment money, and in terms of the funding we could use to create more affordable housing. But we're optimistic that with folks like Scott and Ben in the state Senate and Richard Bloom in the state Assembly, that we are going to see more money flow for affordable housing and for housing in general, and we think that's really key. On Ocean Ave, I want to highlight one more local project we did, because to me it really is sort of the crown jewel, if you will. On Ocean Avenue, literally a block from the beach, we partnered with a market rate developer on city-owned land, and that's what really made the financial difference. It was on city-owned land, so there weren't those embedded land costs. We built projects that were half luxury condominiums, but they were half deed-restricted affordable housing, and it also included some live-work space for artists. So when we can conquer those land costs, when we can overcome those hurdles, when we work together and realize that maybe the cost of getting these remarkable low-income housing units a block from the beach, of getting more artists live workspace a block from the beach, is yes, we're going to have to allow some market rate housing to be built. We get a project that I think everyone in Santa Monica is really proud of. That's 160 affordable residents at the Waverly and the Seychelles down on Ocean Boulevard. So this project was so well received that we won the Urban Land Institute's Global Award of Excellence, not just because it was a project that really recognized the needs in our community, but it's a beautiful project to look at. It's got public art, it has a number of other amenities that serve not only the people who could afford to buy the condominiums there, but also serve the people who are living in the deed-restricted affordable housing. So that whole project and the fees we received to it created more money that we can put in our housing trust fund. You know, I know one of the issues that we talk about a lot when we talk about housing is gentrification, and I think everyone is afraid of that word, although not everyone really maybe understands what causes gentrification. Gentrification is very simple. It's too much money chasing too little housing. And so what that really means, that what we need to do is figure out, since we can't stop rich people from being rich, how do we generate more housing so that the people who can afford very high prices don't buy into our existing neighborhoods? One of the things we did with our land use and circulation element that we developed and passed back in 2010 was to try and drive development out of our existing residential neighborhoods and onto our commercial boulevards and formerly industrial spaces, so that while we could generate more housing, but without displacing residents in their current homes. And that's really been a key of what we've been trying to do locally. So I know you have a lot of questions, and I know that both Scott and Ben have a plane to catch. So I just want to finish up by talking very briefly about something I'm particularly proud of in terms of addressing the issue of gentrification, and that is our Pico planning project. The Pico project started out as how do we create a zoning code for the Pico neighborhood, our most economically disadvantaged neighborhood, so that we could discourage displacement of the people who were there. And to their credit, the people in that neighborhood said, great, we're all for that, but this isn't just about buildings. This isn't just about bricks and mortar. This is about the people who are in the neighborhood. So what we did was create a unique zoning process that had a mix of workshops and community coffees. It had community clotheslines where people put ideas up on boards. And the idea was that the community came together and said, sure, we'll talk about zoning, but we're not going to talk about zoning in the context of the buildings. We want to talk about zoning in the people in the buildings. So it's not a form-based zoning code. It's not even a performance-based zoning code. It's a people-based zoning code. And I'm really proud that we've done that. And just to give you an idea about how that has worked out, the website that we set up has had over 3,200 visits in the last 10 months. We have over 1,000 people in this community who are on the distribution site and keeping abreast of the project. We've had all sorts of almost 300 document downloads, and we've had hundreds of people participate in various workshops held throughout the neighborhood. So it's great to talk about what the state is doing, but I really think it's important to know that when the local government comes together with local citizens and creates the political will to not only build housing, but build affordable housing and protect neighborhoods, it can be done. So thank you very much, and I really appreciate all you do to preserve our community.
Thank you so much, Gleam. Well, that's a lot of information, and I'm sure it's given you all a lot to think about. I'm going to maybe start with just one question, and it's, we heard from Ben about some things that he wishes were not in SB 50. I wonder, Scott, if you could share with us, how did you determine what are the policies you included in SB 50 to address the problem you so eloquently described? And is there anything that is not in it that you perhaps considered putting in? And if you have any thoughts about the things that Ben brought up, please share those as well.
Sure. Don't want to get into a back and forth here, but
Your seatmates, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
We are.
I'm sure
We
it's
literally
okay.
sit we sit next to each other on the Senate floor, and we're good friends. And we just, we got some differences of opinion on this, but I
Probably
never
don't.
once doubted Scott's.
it's one of the rare things that we disagree on.
Yeah.
Just a couple of things. There were a few points that Ben made that I just want to didn't agree with factually. Just to be clear, I think there's a perception by some, and there's a narrative out there that SB 50 gets rid of all local participation in land use and overrides everything. That is not the case. SB 50 does make some changes, and I don't run away from that, in terms of saying, you know what, we should no longer ban apartment buildings and affordable housing near high-quality public transportation and near jobs, because that is exclusionary. It keeps people out of communities, and it's not sustainable. But there are many things that SB 50 completely defers to local decision-making. Overwhelmingly, the bill defers to local height limits. Yes, around fixed rail, it says you can't push height limits below 4 stories or 5 stories, and many communities, frankly, are already at or close to that to begin with. But other aspects of SB 50, it defers to local height limits. It defers to local setbacks. If there are rear yard requirements or other setbacks, it defers to that. It defers to local design standards, including local historic standards. And so historic permits that are required, or historic design standards that are required, or a historic commission, if a city has one, to review changes to historic buildings, SB 50 maintains that fully intact. SB 50 does not change anything about the approval process for individual projects. As you probably know, even if zoning exists for a particular kind of project, that project still has to go through an approval process. It might be a conditional use, it might have to go through CEQA. SB 50 does not change that. Each project will still get reviewed for design and for other local requirements, period. SB 50 does not override local impact fees. So it's not accurate to say that cities will not be able to get money to compensate for the impacts of developments. If a city has a sewer impact fee, a transportation impact fee, an inclusionary affordability, if you want to call that an impact fee for schools or parks. Some cities have childcare impact fees. Whatever the impact fees that a city has, SB 50 projects will have to pay those impact fees, and those fees will be much higher typically, because usually impact fees are measured or calculated based on the size of a project. And so if you're building, let's say, an 8 or a 10 unit building instead of a single family home, it will often be the case that that will be higher. Impact fees are often based either on number of units or square footage or some other metric. And so the bill does not in any way take away cities' abilities to collect impact fees, and those fees will often be much higher if the project is larger. But in terms of what we determine should go in the bill, and again, the bill has now been through almost a 2-year process, and the number of stakeholder meetings that we've had both in Northern California and in Southern California. I've spent a lot of time in Southern California meeting with stakeholders from across the political spectrum. We have met with many, many local elected officials, city managers, mayors of cities. We have the city of Los Angeles and the city of San Francisco, and I believe a few smaller cities have submitted specific feedback about implementation to say, whatever you think about the bill, we want to make sure it's implementable. And so we have suggestions, and we have incorporated those amendments, including from the city of Los Angeles, directly into the bill. But fundamentally, what the bill is about is that we should allow more people to live close to public transportation and to live near where they work. And when you zone only for single-family homes around a train station or in a job center, you are minimizing the number of people who can walk to transit or bike to transit. You're minimizing the number of people who will have a short commute. You're pushing people in the longer commutes. I respect that Zev Yaroslavsky fought to extend subways. That's great. And I have enormous respect for the people of Los Angeles for passing a massive public transportation funding measure. I am extremely jealous as a Bay Area resident that LA did that kind of mega measure, and the Bay Area has not yet done that. I want us to do what LA did. But I also, as LA is building out more public transportation, which is terrific, you've got to make sure you have the density around those transit hubs so that people can easily use it and not have to drive and to get to public transportation. And I know it's a long process. I know that LA, because of the land use patterns, I totally acknowledge it is a struggle and it's going to take time. But if you build out a transit system and you don't have the housing that's close enough to it or enough housing, it's going to struggle with ridership. And that is why we need more density at all income levels around public transportation. And then finally, just in terms of affordability, as I mentioned, and thank you, Senator, for acknowledging that we put these strong demolition protections in. You can't demolish a building under this bill if there's been a tenant residing there at any point in the last 7 years, or if there's been an Ellis Act eviction in the last 15 years. We negotiated those provisions with equity advocates in Los Angeles who fight for tenants every day. We have affordability requirements in the bill, and they go up to 25%. If a city has higher, like Santa Monica, then Santa Monica's higher inclusionary will apply. The San Francisco Planning Department did an analysis of SB 50's impact in San Francisco, and what it concluded, and this conclusion would apply in any city that has affordability requirements. It concluded that SB 50, by expanding the number of apartment buildings allowed, will result in a significant increase of below market rate affordable units, because if you're building single family homes, that does not trigger an inclusionary housing ordinance. It's usually triggered at 5 or 10 or 15 units. So by having more apartment buildings, you're going to trigger the inclusionary more. You're going to result in a lot more below market rate units. So that's how we came up with some of the key elements in the bill. There's a lot more, but I'll stop there.
And Mayor Davis, from the local perspective, is there something you'd like to say about whether local governments are being shut out of the approval process, or is there anything in SB 50 that you wish weren't there?
So my concern about SB 50, and I've told Scott this, is that it's a big stick. And as we know, there are many communities in California that have not been doing what Santa Monica has been doing, have not been carrying their fair share of the load in terms of developing housing, but a city like Santa Monica that has been gets hit with the same big stick that, say, the city of Huntington Beach does. And so, to me, there's sort of a fundamental fairness issue there. But I fully support the idea that we have to build more housing. It is the only way we are going to maximize our use of transit. It's the only way we're going to prevent gentrification, because money always wins. Money will always buy stuff. They will always outbid anyone for the house or the apartment or the land. And so we need to build more housing to tamp down that gentrification impulse. But for me, it's, I wish that our compatriot cities had done a better job of exercising their local control, like many people on the city council here in Santa Monica before me did. Because I think if more cities had done what we've done here in Santa Monica, there wouldn't be a need for an SB 50.
I just want one thing, and I appreciate that, and I think Santa Monica has done a lot of great things. There's, I think, a narrative, and we hear this on all sides of the debate about, I call it the housing as punishment narrative, that we put more housing in the cities that have been naughty, that have refused to build housing, for example. They haven't done what we wanted them to do, so we're going to put the housing there. And for the cities that have done, been on the good side of things, we'll not put the housing there, or we'll treat them with a lighter touch. And the problem with that is I think it sort of views housing as a punishment that gets inflicted on communities. And I don't view housing as a punishment. Housing is where people live. Housing is a good thing. And so yes, of course, Huntington Beach has to do more, and I'm glad that the governor is trying to hold Huntington Beach accountable. But when we're talking about the need to build 3.5 million homes at all income level, it's not about saying where do those homes go to the naughty areas or the good people areas. It's where should the housing be as a matter of sustainability? And that's what SB 50 is about, that the housing should go near the transit and the jobs. That's just my perspective on it.
There's a dimension to the legislation, as I was reading it, that talks about a way for us to address climate change. And Ben, being a strong advocate for environmental policies, do you want to comment at all on the aspects of the bill that are hoping to limit the carbon emissions,
right.
Things like?
Well, I think the concept of having people live close to where they work and go to school and be able to access transit for their major needs is a very positive one from a climate perspective. The idea that one of our problems right now is that people can't afford to live near where they go to work, and so they end up living further and further out, which ends up clogging our roads and creating more pollution and more vehicle miles traveled. And so I think that's a kind of a core value that it's at the heart of some of what we're looking at here. So that concept is less of a problem from my perspective, but I guess I do continue to wonder whether we've done enough to really build the transit infrastructure to be able to handle the kind of growth in communities like this that this bill would presage. I don't disagree, Senator. When you say that it's not going to change the zoning, but it removes all the density limits, and then with the affordable housing density bonus, the height is going to. That really kind of. It's a little. It's not entirely accurate to say that the zoning is going to stay exactly the same.
I didn't say the zoning would stay the same.
Right.
The zoning does change.
Okay. Well, but your chart here says
that's not my chart.
Okay.
Someone else's.
Someone else's chart. But
I'm not that good an artist.
To be fair, part of the problem, Senator, is that it's such an enormous bill And and Senator Weiner has another enormous bill on ocean acidification and ocean protection that I think is great because I'm very concerned about pollution issues. But this is such an enormous bill that half the time, and it's constantly getting changed and edited. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to keep up with all the latest changes. That's part of how a complicated bill works.
It got changed one time. It's not been constantly changed and edited, and it is a big bill, but this is a big problem, and small steps don't always solve big problems, and we have a crisis on our hand, and people are living in cars, and people are commuting 2.5 hours to work, and people are getting evicted, and we have to take big solutions.
I totally agree. All I will say is that people are living in cars in New York too, where there's much more housing supply, and in Manhattan you've got enormous density and also very high costs. And so I guess I continue to struggle with the extent to which this takes away a carrot and stick approach and just applies a statewide standard. I mean, you can parse that apart and say that you're protecting zoning, but to the extent that you're removing the density limits, it's a very aggressive move and it's very big. And you're right. I understand that you're trying to address a big problem. There's just I think there's got to be ways to address this issue in a way that's a little bit more respectful of local communities' right to self-determination.
So we have one senator who had a flight that was a little delayed, and we have another senator who has a flight to catch. And so I want to thank Senator Scott Weiner so much for being here and for being so patient.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Belle.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
We are going to open it up for questions for our remaining panelists.
You can't take a question.
And we can still ask the questions, and we will. Senator Weiner has a flight to catch. I can't make him be late for his flight, so. So if we'd like to go to the microphones now.
Is there someone who's a spokesman for the bill who could, I mean, is there someone from Abundant Housing that might be able to take some questions from folks? No? Okay. Is there?
So, please, I think we have our microphones out in the audience, and we may not be able to answer your question, but we can certainly have you express what you'd like to ask and send. So.
I'll try my best. I mean, I think there are some folks here who obviously support what he's trying to do, so maybe they're.
So our two facilitators, would you guys like to? We are lining up, as I said in the beginning, that for questions, we'd like you to go to the aisles where the microphones are.
Students to ask their questions first, because this forum has been designed as a part of a course for the students. So I noticed that there are a couple of students who are in line, so I'd like to invite them up first, and we'll start taking their questions.
Dear students.
I just had a question for the mayor about the zoning by people. I think it's progressive. I think it's different. But how would you reassure me as an African-American man who is a minority in the country that that my race would not play a part in me getting a place in that apartment?
So our Pico neighborhood is a diverse neighborhood, and the idea was that this was not a process, it was a top-down process, but a bottom-up process, meaning that everyone in the neighborhood has the opportunity to participate. And so whether you're a black man or a Latina woman or a white person, everyone has an opportunity to participate. So that's really the way that we're trying to make sure everyone has a voice and that everyone has a seat at the table. We could have created a commission, or we could have created a task force. And then a few people would have a voice and a few people would have a seat. But this was a situation where we felt it was important to hear from people who normally didn't speak up. And that's why we've been having these neighborhood-based events where people are welcome. Everyone is welcome. They're all public. We do translations for people where English is a second language, and it allows everyone in the neighborhood to participate. So that was really the reason for not doing it in the normal way that zoning is passed, where the Planning Commission does it and then the City Council passes it. The idea here was to have it be a real grassroots process where everyone had the ability to participate. And if you live in the Pico neighborhood, we're not done with the process yet, so please participate. Get on the Pico Wellbeing Plan website and find out about the various events we have.
Hello, my name is Hunter Ballingstrom. Next year I'm going to be the Director of Sustainability at Santa College of the Associate Students. And I fully support SB 50. I grew up in Huntington Beach, actually, and so I directly saw the discriminatory effects that single-family housing can have concerning racism and classism. In my city, since all city council candidates in the most recent midterm elections ran on opposing high-density development. I think the environmental effects of upzoning were covered already pretty well, but I would also like to add that single-family residential zoning is racist as covered in the color of law, since it outprices people of color who are still feeling the effects of redlining and other systems of housing discrimination. Especially, yes, I have a question at the end.
So we have to get to the question.
My question is do you think that the decommodification of housing is a viable solution in solving our housing crisis when housing is especially used as a vehicle of wealth storage and growth in our current economy?
Oh, that's yours.
And it,
So
I'll
you
give,
mean, are you, God, so you're talking about increasing access to public housing? Is that sort of
That could be one strategy, or like vacancy decontrol, or cooperative ownership of apartment buildings.
Yeah.
Basically anything that cuts out financial investment in housing and finally recognizing housing as a human right.
Yeah. No, I'm very supportive of those kinds of things. I mean, I think that that if you're trying to talk about doing away with the real estate market in general, I think that would be a pretty difficult thing to implement. But I think in general, if you look at some of the progressive things that we've been working on here and the legacy that the progressive leadership in Santa Monica has put in place with regards to renters protections and public housing support and affordable housing support, I mean, those are all wonderful things. I think we need to try to expand them and grow them. So I'm sure we could find a lot of common ground on those kinds of things.
do we want to go to the other side?
Oh, question. Oh, hi. I can't see my notes. It's so dark here. First of all, I wanted to thank Senator Allen for his eloquent speech at the Transportation Committee for SB 827 that you did not support, and we were very grateful. I had friends up there, but I watched it on my computer. I just also would like to say to the mayor, we need you in LA. Could you be my mayor? We don't have a housing deficit. We have an affordable housing deficit. And I was going to ask Senator Weiner if he was familiar with our Los Angeles Chief Legislative Analyst report, which recommended to City Council to vote to oppose, which they did unanimously. In dense areas, they have reached their required state housing goals, 13,305.
Question.
Well, we have TOC measure JJJ, and I was going to ask you, Senator Weiner, are you familiar with that? Oh.
I'm sure he is.
And are you familiar with all of the housing that's now currently being built in Los Angeles, which is why they voted against it? We are living in the midst of seas of cranes above us and people living in tents on the streets.
Yeah.
So things are being built, but we don't have affordable. And that's the biggest problem. It cannot be a one-size-fits-all, because I do believe the senator is not familiar with every community in every city in the state of California.
Okay. You didn't need Senator Weiner because he didn't have
No,
to
and
answer a
I'm sure
question.
he's.
So,
Yeah.
I have a question.
Let's go to
She
the
won't let me
students
continue
on the-
because I have a question for Senator Weiner and he can't answer.
We have a question on this side. Sherry, we have a question.
Yes, thank you.
Hello, my name is Lucia Aguilar-Cole, and I am a student. I hope to be one of the many graduating with an AA in public policy. I actually took Professor Davis's class, and amazing experience. I've learned so much, and I was able to do the internship program as well, and I did it on housing and homelessness. I, actually went and worked with people at access sites in Santa Monica. So for the mayor, we are facing a gilded age. We have high housing, or high businesses and billions of dollars, but there's 60,000 people in LA County without a home. How do we fix this problem? This is a huge crisis. This is not just, this is housing.
Well, yeah, let me address it. And I can't speak for the entire county. I just get the 8.3 square miles in Santa Monica, and we have over 900 homeless people in our community, and that's a shame and an embarrassment. The question of how do we fix it, there's no one right answer, because every one of those individuals became homeless for a somewhat different reason. It could be an economic homelessness where they lost a job. It could be that their medical bills were too high. It could be that they have mental health issues. It could be that they have physical health issues. So here in Santa Monica, we've made reducing homelessness one of our budgetary framework priorities, meaning we are going to invest as much money as we can to accelerate our ability to get people off our streets. We have a number of wonderful programs. We have our help team, which are our police officers who reach out regularly with case counselors to our homeless population. We have our fire department going out and trying to treat the physical ailments that the people on our streets are facing. We have a wonderful person who's in charge of trying to reduce this problem, Elisa Orduña. So we have put our money where our heart is on this one, and we are really trying to conquer the problem. But it's an intransigent problem because every homeless person is just that, a person with different needs, and they ended up on the streets for different reasons. So we are doing a lot of things. We actually now have a dashboard on our website where you can go and look and see the kinds of strides that we're making in reducing homelessness, and also get a sense of the vast range of programs. If I listed all the programs we had, our city manager, Rick Cole, would tell me I left off 10, and we'd all be here for an hour. We know that it's a problem and it's a priority for the entire city council, and we are investing a lot of our resources into solving that problem.
Ben, anything you want to add? Or we can go to the next question. Okay.
And I fully am supportive, but how do we start to rewrite and redefine zoning codes?
Lucia, we have to go to the next questioner.
I'm talking to Chair. We got a question over here.
Hello. This is for Senator Weiner. I really appreciate the fact that you're here. But the question needs to be asked, and maybe Senator Allen can answer it because he does know the bill. So the question is this. Senator Weiner did mention a couple of times some of these studies that have been done to address the fact that his bill would, in fact, lower the rents if we build more. And he didn't cite those studies. And we weren't able to ask him a question of, where this has been done in the past and has been done successfully. So I'm wondering if you can cite the study, where the money from the studies have come from, and whether it's the same money that that funded his campaigns. Thank you.
Yeah, there's competing studies on this, I know.
We have a question here that's for one of the persons on the stage.
Good. Let's go to that.
Hi, my name is Heidi Feldstein. Senator Allen, I wanted to just ask you, because my biggest worry about this bill is a huge top-level policy issue. I recognize financial products when they're sliced and diced real estate. They did it with timeshares, and the timeshare market crashed and left us holding the bag. The real estate industry did it with CDOs, and the CDO market crashed and we got 2008. This bill slices and dices real estate in a way that permits its securitization in the global financial markets. Have you heard of a product called NBO? Never been occupied. It is apparently a product that is sold on the global financial markets for EB5 investors, particularly from China. And I am very worried that this bill statewide is creating a real estate speculative bubble. It includes luxury McMansions. It shouldn't apply to single-family luxury McMansions. You outlaw single-family parcels, you should be outlawing the luxury McMansions as projects. It permits ultra-luxury buildings without a single unit of affordable housing up to 10 units. It should not do that. If this is really about creating housing supply, what is it that, are you willing to support an amendment to take out luxury McMansions? Are you willing to support an amendment that would take out the no affordable housing for 10 units or under?
Thank you. Anything you want to say about that?
Well, I think he has. I think this is one of the critiques of the bill. In addition, I mean that it does. There is some stuff in here about inclusionary, but it really is pretty small in the grand scheme of things, and that this could be one of the unintended impacts, or perhaps intended from some of the supporters. But I would love to see him. I'd love to see him mitigate for that speculative impact. I think if you look right now, one of the reasons why we've had a problem is because LA has been seen as a relatively good place for high net worth individuals to invest and park capital, exactly. And so you have a lot of money coming in from all over the world, particularly Russia, Middle East, and China, buying up a lot of the high-end apartments in the city, and because it's seen as a good deal. And so that's another, I think, big concern here, is that this could help to fund that sort of construction, but it's not necessarily going to end up really impacting the broader population, because it's ultimately going to be where developers can make money that they're going to put their emphasis. This bill doesn't say, it's not a command and control bill, right? It doesn't say we need housing here, so let's construct housing here. It basically says we're going to loosen the restrictions so that and let kind of the real estate community, the development community, determine where that's going to go. Well, it's going to go where the money is, So.
Okay, we have a question on this side too now.
I haven't looked into SB 50 as much as I'd like, but how does building more housing next to transit stations positively affect students and residents when many of LA transit systems do not work for a large % of residents and students? Shouldn't there be more of a focus on making transit and housing for the people already living in these areas?
Yeah, no question about it. I mean, I think that look, if you guys have ever been to Washington D.C., for example, there's a subway. It's a really fast, efficient system. It's had some problems recently, but in general, it's a good subway system. And in Northern Virginia, for example, they have built high-rise apartments right next to a number of the stations along the blue and the orange lines. And it really has become a truly transit-oriented project, right? So a lot of young people who work in the city live in these apartments. They hop on the train, they take it into work, and they're never on the roads. One of the problems we have is we don't have a system that's anywhere near as systematic. It's not nowhere near as holistic. But it's part of the reason why I say that we ought to let that if we created a system that had a little bit more discretion for cities, a city like Los Angeles could say, hey, we are building out a rail system, and we could handle a little bit more density here, maybe a little bit less there, and you provide a certain amount of flexibility to the city to be able to make those determinations and really make the system truly transit oriented. I think that's something that might make sense. What he has here doesn't provide enough discretion.
Okay, to this side.
Okay, so I'm a Santa Monica student, and I was just getting to know better about this SB 50, and I heard that it does not override the state power to charge the impact fee on multi-floor building. So I was thinking how this would, for example, allow privates to build more affordable housing, thinking about that they will have to pay more to build affordable housing, then they will get less money out of it. instead of luxury apartment?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I commented to Gleam that unless they have some protection in here, cities are going to basically just jack up all the local impact fees. I mean, that's the obvious reaction, right? To just, what he said is that it doesn't stop any existing local impact fee. Now, not every city charges every local impact fee they could possibly charge. It'd be interesting to see if there's something in the bill that limits a city's ability to create new local impact fees. But that would be the obvious reaction that I would engage in if I was a city council member, just to make sure that the city was getting adequately compensated.
Yeah, and certainly in Santa Monica, we have a number of local impact fees. We do have, for example, a child care impact fee, a transportation impact fee, and that fee is determinative of the value of the development. So Senator Weiner may be right to some extent that fees will go up, but I think you have to do a nexus study, and there's a whole process you have to do before imposing those fees, and a lot of localities don't have them in place. So it might be problematic for some localities that don't, that they would have this upswing in development. But I think that the biggest issue is not so much the fees. The developers will find a way to pay the fees. They always seem to manage to do that. I think the bigger issue is, from my perspective as a local government official, is that the Santa Monica is going to be under the same regime, if you will, that cities that have been resisting housing for decades are. And in a sense that, yes, Senator Weiner said it views housing as a punishment. I don't think that's it at all. But it's if you have two children and one is misbehaving and one is doing well, you don't punish them both the same. And I think that's really how people in Santa Monica, who have, at great political risk, taken a lot of measures that have really created a lot of housing, including deed-restricted affordable housing in Santa Monica, and treats them the same as a lot of localities that have been fighting housing. And I think that, from our local perspective, is a big issue.
Yeah.
And
I also see, I will say that one of the continuing concerns that's out there from some of the poverty advocates, and I know there's a lot of them who are opposed to the bill, is that there is just not enough in here in terms of inclusionary housing, and that the number of affordable units really does pale in comparison to market rate units in the bill. And it's why a lot of very lefty groups, including the LA Tenants Union and others, East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice, are come out in opposition, because I think they just don't think it goes far enough in terms of prioritizing affordable housing.
And so, Ben, the idea that creating more supply is going to help relieve the pressure and therefore
I think
allow
it's kind
for
of
more affordable.
a little bit of a trickle-down approach. I mean, and to some, the data is so different from city to city. I mentioned Manhattan, where they've got an enormous amount of supply and very low affordability. But there are places, for example, where luxury apartments that are originally sold to wealthy folks, and then over time, as the apartment gets a little older, that person wants to move on to another place, and then it kind of moves into a new category, and middle-income people. That has happened in some places. But I think what ends up happening here is that there's so much demand that lousy places like my townhouse end up being way too much more valuable than it should be. So
I just checked, Mike. We only have 7 minutes.
I mean, to
left
some extent, we've been
because
victims of our own success, right? Part of it is that so many people want to be here, that it just creates this market. And I think he ultimately is making a basic supply and demand argument that if we have tons more supply, it will eventually lower prices.
Yeah. 7 minutes left, so let's do. I think we have time for one more question on this side, and one more question on this side. So.
Can I let the student ask the question, please? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Isham Janmakani. I'm the current AS Vice President for Santa Monica College. And as a representative of my student body constituents, I want us all to be more, I guess you can say, educated on the matter of SB 50. So I was wondering if I could go across the panel asking for your interpretation of the bill and what do you think it entails?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that last part. I'm
sorry. If we can have your interpretation of the bills just to provide it to the AS board. And allow. I'm representing 30,000 students. I want to make sure I'm representing them right. So I was wondering if I could have each one of your interpretations of SB 50 and what do you think it entails or what does it come with?
Well,
We
that's
discussed-
sort of the
we
whole
did
program.
discuss.
You know, and we only have 7 minutes. But,
Think of one,
but
like,
what I
one
will
thing
say,
you
and I
wanna
said
know
it
about
before, is that I agree with Senator Weiner that we need to figure out ways to build more housing throughout California. I don't think anybody disputes that. As I said, people are leaving this state because they can't afford to live here. You have colleagues at the college who are homeless because they can't afford to buy homes or rent an apartment. You know, someone asked about, homeless people. We have people on our streets because they can't afford homes. So I don't think there's anyone who can say with a straight face that we don't have a housing issue, where the difference is how do we approach it. I think you've heard from both Ben and I that we have some concerns with SB 50. Perhaps if the bill were amended, it might be able to garner support. My concern as a local government official is that it punishes the localities that have been working hard. I mean, for example, this community, this city council and this community supported Students for Students, which is a shelter down at Mount Olive Lutheran Church, which actually provides shelter to homeless college students, both at SMC and UCLA, and has been a model that is now going to be expanded to USC. So we have to look for creative solutions to the housing problem. I think as Ben states, it's a question of does one size fit all? And in my role as a local government official, I want to see the communities that have not been carrying their fair share of the load carry a larger share of the load. So I can tell the people in my community, everyone's contributing, we need to continue to contribute too. But how do I look my constituents in the face and say, we're going to build more, while other cities are building nothing. So.
Right. Yeah.
You want
I
to
mean,
add
the other
anything?
thing, I think, look, I mean, I think he believes in this bill and wants to see this bill pass. I also think that, that he's also trying to spark this kind of conversation. I think he thinks that, and I think there's some truth to this, that if it weren't for a bill like this that freaks everybody out, that cities and others, particularly those who haven't been carrying their fair share, are just going to foot drag and not do anything and just kind of hope that they're going to hide their heads in the sand and pretend the problem's going to go away. So that's part of my interpretation of what he's doing here is to force this difficult grappling with this big challenge. And I think what he would say is okay, well, if you don't like my bill, what do you propose to address this problem alternatively?
Our twisting. Do you have about 10 more minutes?
Yeah,
We can go a little bit long.
yeah.
Okay, we can go a little longer than we intended. So we have 10 more minutes, and we are on this side now.
And I'd like to recommend if you could go right to a question. And Sherry, if it's okay with you, I'd like to say we're going to close the line. So we're not going to take anybody else in line for questions. But maybe we can move quickly so that everybody who's been standing here can get their question.
My question is, with the completion of these affordable housing units, how are they being regulated, and are local Santa Monica residents getting priority access to them?
So the city has an affordable housing list, and we actually recently worked with Community Core to consolidate into one list, and there are priorities on the list. The first priority is people who have been Ellised or otherwise kicked out of their housing in Santa Monica. They get first dibs. The next people in priority on the list are people who live or work in Santa Monica. And there are strict affordability requirements. People who want to live in these units have to provide documentation of their income level that shows that they qualify to live in these low-income units.
Thank you. We can go to the side.
Hi. I wanted to say to everyone in the room, I'm on a planning and land use committee for my neighborhood council, and if 1/100th of the people in this room would show up to our meetings, I would be grateful, because I think democracy actually works really beautifully when people have a conversation. My question to anyone, there's Dr. Michael Storper, who is an urban geography economist at UCLA, and he's recently issued a study that looks very specifically at the dynamics of Los Angeles economically and takes apart the implications of things like high-density transit-oriented housing. So I'm just wondering if any of you have looked him up or have studied his information.
I'd love to.
Yeah.
Please send us information about it. Yeah.
And may I
Yeah.
ask, are you in the city of Los Angeles? Yes, I am. So for students who don't know, the city of Los Angeles, being so large, has neighborhood councils, and yours, or your, what is the committee called that you're on?
Westchester Playa.
And Santa Monica is, of course, 92,000 instead of 2 or 3 million. So we don't have quite the same kinds of committees, but you can always come to planning commission meetings or city council meetings and have the same kind of.
Sorry, every neighborhood council has a planning and land use committee, which is made up of board members.
She was asking for the name of the author in the book.
Yeah.
Oh, the name of the author. I'm so sorry. Michael Storper, Dr. Michael Storper, UCLA, Luskin School.
Thank you.
And what's the book name, do you know? Okay, we'll look him up.
On this side, please. We have a question.
Yes, my question is, since all the people that are paying these really high rents, a big part of them are either in Northern California in the high-tech industry, and those companies like Facebook and Google really pay no federal taxes and hardly any local taxes, and they're creating this housing burden. And the same thing down here in the entertainment industry. Why doesn't the state of California and Sacramento, who takes most of the revenue from the state, put it back into the local community, because they know where the housing needs to be, and they can buy the land, make it way more affordable, instead of building $6,000 a unit apartments?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, that's what what the Atkins measure and the Bell measure that I mentioned seek to do. The question becomes, how much of the state budget is going to go into this, and there's a lot of other priorities, but some of that work's already happening in those two bills that I mentioned.
So I'm going to take the student first, because that's the balance that we're striking here, is in favor of the students.
My question is to the mayor, and I understand why you do this in a local level, but my problem with all of this is that you're dealing with an overpopulation here in this city, and you're dealing with hard traffic. And I don't know how you could balance so many people with so little land. It's just, I don't know how it's even possible, because driving here from Culver City is 40 minutes because of traffic. And that's just on the streets. So my question is, how can you balance that?
Well, that's always a tough balance, but the interesting thing is that, like housing, traffic is a regional issue. And what Ben says is absolutely right. One of the ways we can address traffic is by building out our transit system, which is what we are doing. People may have heard that there's recently been an idea floated from the Southern California Association of Governments about congestion pricing, which would charge you to drive into a particularly crowded area, and that would hopefully reduce traffic within that area. Traffic is something that this city deals with on a daily basis, and certainly in the summer when people come to enjoy our wonderful beaches, we're gridlocked. There's no doubt about it. But it's not necessarily traffic generated by housing in Santa Monica. In fact, what we know is that if we build housing in Santa Monica near jobs, then people don't have to drive. It's the people who live in Palmdale and work in Santa Monica who are on the road for 2 hours who are causing the traffic. It's not the people who live in Santa Monica and work in Santa Monica that are causing the traffic. So while we certainly need to be cognizant of the traffic all the time, because it's something that we all face every day of our lives, we also need to remember that when we drive somewhere and we get mad about the traffic, we're the traffic. The guy in the car next to you is as mad about you being on the road as you are about him being on the road. And so the way we're going to solve that is with giving people options so that they don't have to drive. Doesn't mean we're getting rid of cars, doesn't mean you can't take your car to the grocery store and buy 5 bags of groceries. But if we all drove a little less, it would be an amazing impact. So, there have been discussions about people committing to driving 15 miles less a week, that sort of thing. So I think we're all working on it. That's why this county has passed 2 sales taxes to develop more transit, while here in Santa Monica, we run the Big Blue Bus, which is a wonderful local resource for transit. We also have developed specific transit programs for seniors and disabled people so that they're able to get around. So it's really having a suite of services that gets people out of cars that's going to address traffic.
And we do have the Expo line.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And by the way, Santa Monica invested in that line coming to Santa Monica. We had to fight hard to get that. And we have 3 stations, which is great because it makes it more accessible to people throughout Santa Monica.
And it is Bike It, Walk It week this week.
That's right.
So if we all can bike it and walk it a little bit more. Okay, on to this side.
We also have a Santa Monica College station, right? We have a stop,
That's right.
which we're very happy about.
Hello, I'm a condo owner in Santa Monica, one bedroom condo. I live near transit. I live near an industrial complex, and I'm worried about SB 50. If someone offers money to me and says, this is a real good deal, how good is it unless I can buy into the new system as it's set up? I want to know, is there protection for people to buy in, not some exorbitant price that I won't be able to afford even though the contractor gave me money? I want to know if I can continue to be a homeowner in Santa Monica.
Well, I don't think there's anything in SB 50 that guarantees you that if somebody offers you money to buy your condo, that you can buy another condo in Santa Monica. So I think what Senator Weiner would probably say is, so don't sell your condo.
If you don't want to.
Yeah, if you don't want to move and you want to stay in Santa Monica, then you don't have to sell your condo. There's nothing that makes you sell your condo. So, I mean, the way the bill works is it doesn't make anyone in a single-family neighborhood or in an existing condominium sell their property. But it also doesn't guarantee you that if you do sell your property, in fact, a lot of people in Santa Monica face that very conundrum, is that if they sell in Santa Monica, they can't buy something else in Santa Monica.
Right.
That's actually very common here because the prices keep accelerating so quickly. But there's nothing in SB 50 that either forces you to sell or guarantees you'll be able to buy something else, is my understanding.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm coming from a perspective of age. I've been in real estate for 50 years, and so I'm happy that there are a lot of students here. I have a slightly different perspective because of my age. When rent control passed, when rent control passed, you could buy a house for $100,000 in Sunset Park. It was easy, and that compares with people that stayed under rent control. They're still my tenants. 40 years later, they're still paying $500, $560, $540, $580, but they have nothing to give to their kids. My advice is get on the purchase, get equity as soon as possible. Santa Monica did some things to encourage this. You may have forgotten TORCA. There's a conversion law. It had, what I'd advise you as the board to consider another similar TORCA law. TORCA was Tenant Ownership Rights Charter Amendment. It allowed people to buy their unit or stay under rent control. It's interesting to compare the two. What happened to the people that are still living under rent control versus the people that bought? So I encourage the city to not only do that. I thought Community Corp was paying top dollar. I would love to buy all the buildings back that I sold to Community Corp. Again, that's an investment. Buy, get equity, the city or...
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll go to a question.
Yeah,
on
though I
this
will
side.
say the next generation is having a much harder time because of the amount of debt that we've forced them to take on just to be able to get a college degree, and so there's a lot less disposable income.
Okay, can I ask a question? I just want to say thank you, Senator Allen, for being in the hot seat. Maybe since you sit next to Weiner, you can ask him some of these questions.
Yeah, I can text him too if you
Yeah,
want.
text him, please.
It's
Text
really
him.
awkward because yeah.
Well, we're expecting you to go back to Sacramento and really air the concerns with this bill. My question to you is this, and you alluded to it briefly. There are really no protections for historic structures. This incentivizes builders to come in and tear down something that we zoned low density at like 2 stories so we could protect it. There was no incentive for the landowner to come down and build an 8-story building because there was no zoning. So really the bill, in my reading, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see protections for historic buildings.
I don't either.
It's not there. It's
Yeah.
weird, and there's like some vague illusion, and he mentioned it, but it's not there. So that is my question. Is there historic preservation in the bill?
Yeah.
I'm not
Thank you.
seeing it.
Okay, thank you. I think that question did get discussed by our panelists, and one said there is and one said there isn't. So, and I think we have time
think
for
you're right.
2 more questions. Do you have
Look,
anything to say?
I don't. I have what I have here is a copy of the bill analysis from the last committee hearing, and it does say here, SB 50 also applies to historic districts, areas of California that the state, federal, or local governments have designated as having cultural significance and whose character may be impaired by new development. And it says to ensure that these parts of the state are protected, the committee may wish to consider amending the bill to limit the applicability of the bill to those areas or allow local governments to make findings of a project that benefits from an ECI would impair coastal or historic resources. Well, they seem to have responded on the coastal zone issue. 4 cities with a population under 50,000. Yeah.
Whatever's left of Hollywood will be torn down.
Yeah.
And that is a cultural resource, not just for the state, but for the entire country and an entire planet.
That's why I brought it up. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it is 7.
This is my last question on this side. This was
Okay.
the end of my line
Yeah.
over here.
My question actually complements hers. I live in a historical neighborhood in West Hollywood, and we happen to be a little less than a quarter of a mile from a bus stop. And we're all sitting there thinking a bomb's going to drop on our neighborhood. The developers in the neighborhood are just all lurking around like vultures. And I just wonder, to you, Senator Allen, how did this bill get so far? How did it happen? And what are you doing to actually stop it? Because it's got to be one of the biggest transferences of real estate. I don't understand why the media is not packing this room right now. It's just unbelievable. And when I hear you, how do you know so little?
That's a good
about
question, Senator Allen.
What are we doing?
Well, actually, the reason, it's very early stage of this bill. It hasn't even made it to the Appropriations Committee yet. It hasn't gone to the Senate floor. The reason I haven't actually been able to cast a vote on this yet. I'm not on the Housing Committee. And so, for me, I chair the Environmental Quality Committee. I serve on 5 other committees, but this particular bill hasn't come to me yet. So I'm still, scrambling a little bit to get an understanding of exactly what's in here. And there was an enormous amendment that was taken that we're all trying to figure out that happened about a week or 2 ago. So, so when you say how did it get this far, I mean, it actually isn't that far along yet. It's still just past the committee stage. And it hasn't come to either the appropriations or the Senate floor yet.
And I believe the next scheduled
But
vote is
as I say, I oppose it. I mean, I have real concerns.
on Tuesday. The next scheduled vote is at least on the
appropriations,
state
yeah.
website. It's the 14th.
The Appropriations Committee.
I believe it's on May 14th.
And if it gets out of the Appropriations Committee, then it will make it to the Senate floor.
Yeah.
And at that point, I'll have an opportunity to weigh in. But I just don't happen to be on the committee, the committees that saw this bill. You have to understand there's thousands of bills that we're dealing with.
Okay. One last question on this side.
One last question. I have to hold the mic.
Oh, okay. Hello, Senator Allen. I'm on the board of Spalding Square, one of the oldest historical districts in Los Angeles. We have a huge amount of Hollywood filming. Lucille Ball grew up there. We have the Nightmare on Elm Street house. Hundreds of people come every year. The Hangover was filmed there. We have people of every race and income bracket. Trust me, I wish I was a millionaire. I'm not. I'm incredibly lucky. There is no protection for any historical district here until you include every property. The non-conforming properties are not covered at the moment, which means our districts are toast.
Right.
Can I ask Senator Allen if you and Senator Weiner will take a meeting with some of the representatives of our historical districts in Sacramento or in your local office? We will come to you. We need to talk about this. We need to stop the destruction of our city.
Yeah. I'm certainly happy to take the meeting, and I would absolutely encourage him to. I will say he actually has been, he really flew down for the KCRW interview and this. So, I know people are frustrated that he left, but the guy represents San Francisco. But if you come up to Sacramento, I will strongly encourage him to take the meeting, and so far he's been pretty good about that. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I think that it concludes our question.
Is it an SMC student?
Yes.
All right.
SMC student question?
A student in my class.
Yeah. Okay, so today we are discussing on how we can solve the housing crisis, but there are victims right now that need immediate solutions, and these solutions are not immediate. They need housing security. And one of the things that have been proposed in the Assembly is Assembly Bill 302, which allows for homeless students facing insecurity to park the cars on college,
campus, yeah.
community college campuses, and to spend the nights there. Okay,
Yeah.
and are both of you aware of this?
Yeah.
We're very aware of this, right? So can I today get an endorsement from both of you that you both support Assembly Bill 302, and if AB 302 gets to the Senate, Senator Allen, you will vote for this bill?
Yeah, no, I do support it. I think I may even be a co-author. It's one of my colleagues from the Jewish caucus, Mark Berman's bill. And I believe that our caucus has come out in formal support. It also was supported by the LA Times editorial. I'm looking up my handy dandy ledge info thing here now. But yes, I do support it, and I think it's a good bill.
Well, and the city council has to take a vote of the city council to support anything, but I think it is consistent with the positions that we've taken in the past. And I know actually people here in Santa Monica have been working with some of the free parking that is going to be happening in the Westwood area and actually contributing some resources so that people can live safely within their cars. And be close to UCLA, for example, but also close to Santa Monica. So I will investigate whether or not we may have already taken a position because it is consistent with what we've done, but if we haven't, it's something we can address.
Yeah, I think it's a good bill.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And before we conclude, I just want to, on SB 50, the co-authors in the Senate are Senators Caballero, Hueso, Morlock, Skinner, and Stone. And the co-authors in the Assembly are Burke, Chu, is it Dieppe? Deep?
Yeah, Tyler Dieppe, yeah.
Fong, Kalra, Kiley, Lowe, McCarty, Rivas, Robert Rivas, Ting, and Wicks. And so you get a sense of the support in each house for SB 50. And if you would like to follow the progression of the legislation, and you can put your input in through the website that the state Senate has, or you can make sure that you send letters to those legislators in the committees that are going to be hearing the bill soon. And I did look up the bill today, and I do believe that the next committee is on Tuesday the 14th, but I encourage you to go on to the State Senate website to double check. All the information is very accessible. And I think tonight has been an amazing show of civic engagement and advocacy, and it's been helpful for our students to see passionate advocates for something and against something. And so we want to just do another huge round of applause for our speakers. How proud are we that our representatives who represent us here in Santa Monica are so thoughtful and informed and patient with us all. So thank you. We can't thank you enough for being here. We thank all of you for being here. We really appreciate you hanging in, and we are concluding our 2019 Spring Symposium with this event, but we would be happy to inform you of all of our future PPI events. We will have our Fall Arts and Cultural Affairs Forum in November. And so email us at ppi@smc.edu if you'd like to be added to our list so that we can inform you of our what and where and when our future events will be. So thank you again to all the crew that made this possible. I didn't name Marilyn Landau from our staff before, I think, and to everybody for sticking in there for the evening. So thank you, have a great evening, and keep following the legislation.